Imagine losing access to your money, not by accident, not because of fraud or theft, and not because you broke the law, but because your thoughts are a threat. That's not a warning on eventuality, it's already happening. You don't know it yet, but your bank account has become a political loyalty test. CBDCs, that's Central Bank Digital Currencies, AI surveillance, blacklists, silent account freezes with no court, no charges. It's already in motion. And here I show you how. So what's the problem? When dissent gets financially punished, the truth gets filtered out. Alternative views disappear, not because they're false, but because they're inconvenient. So while some lose their voices, others lose access to the very voices that challenge the official script. So what I'm talking about here isn't just about protesters or whistleblowers. It's about you, the parent, for example, who's asking the wrong questions, the donor to the wrong cause, the journalist who follows a story too far down the rabbit hole. My point is, you don't have to be a radical to get flagged. You just have to think for yourself. They're building the infrastructure of a velvet cage, one safety measure at a time. And by the time you realize what's missing from your account, from your feed, from your understanding of the world, it will be too late. Now, a quick note before we start. I made this video not because I love talking into a void or into an empty microphone. I made it because I just published this expose. It's called Pay, Obey, or Get Debanked, and you can find it on my Substack. It's a detailed investigation about how, almost overnight, our financial institutions became NATO's thought police, and what that means for you, even if you think you have nothing to lose. But being realistic, I know most people aren't going to sit down to read a multi-page expose. In fact, and I have said this before, we know from scientific studies that 60 to 80% of internet users get most or all of their news just from the headlines, and around 75% of social media users share links without clicking to read the article. And it's probably even worse for traditional print media. Makes you wonder why we keep writing these kind of articles in the first place. So that's exactly why I'm recording this. Not as a substitute to the article, I still hope and recommend you read it, because in it you find many details and sources that I can't touch here. It will be worth your time. One last thing, if this kind of presentation interests you, you might want to watch my take on how unelected officials like Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas are pushing us towards a global war, or how Trump prepares for a war with China. You really have to see it to believe it. The former foreign minister of Malta, Evariste Bartolo, read my report on that very topic, and in my interview with him you can find out just how alarmed he was by what I found. And don't forget, this channel is shadow banned, as you can see on these screenshots from viewer comments. Even if you have subscribed, there is no guarantee that YouTube presents any of my content to you. In fact, YouTube might unsubscribe you without you even knowing. And no, I'm not making this up, so do with it what you will. But back to my story. It's end of July 2025, and this year has already made one thing brutally clear. Western democracies are waging war. But not only the kind with guns and bombs, they're also fighting a quieter, slicker, more subtle war. The targets? You, me, anyone who steps out of line. What we are witnessing is the rise of financial authoritarianism dressed up in the language of democracy. NATO's not just building tanks anymore, they're engineering mines. And what do the governments of the NATO states do? They're rolling out regulations that let them freeze your bank account if you express the wrong views in public or online. Let's start with NATO itself. In case you missed it, they've openly rebranded themselves as warriors of the brain. It's not a metaphor. They're literally calling it cognitive warfare. I've covered it before. The idea: treat your mind as contested territory. Influence how you think, what you believe, and who you trust. It's no longer about defending Europe. It's about controlling perception. This is really serious. I can't emphasize this enough. It's also why I've written an expose about cognitive warfare for those who want to get the details. But here is what happens in a nutshell. In a 2022 NATO communique, they laid it all out. And I quote this, make everyone a weapon. That's the goal. It's not just soldiers, it's everyone. Civilians, you reading this, you tweeting that. The human domain. That's how they call it. After land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace, the human domain, that's your brain, is now the sixth domain of battle, of warfare. And that's official in their documents. Translation: they want to control your mind and to do so with sophisticated psychological tools that can exploit your mental vulnerabilities. Everything goes, from AI to mimetic engineering. And I'm saying this as an academically trained behavior analyst. And here's the interesting thing. They openly admit that it isn't just about enemy states. It's about you, at least if you're a citizen of a NATO country. NATO strategists are worried we, the people, have become the fifth column. That's actually the term they're using, fifth column. That our doubts, our resistance to official narratives, our questions make us soft targets for foreign influence. So they've decided to preempt it by managing what we think. Again, managing what we think, that's actually in the document. You think that's far-fetched? Well, in Canada, during COVID, you might remember, the military ran a spy-ops on their own people. No mandate, no civilian oversight, no political discussion. Just generals treating a pandemic as a unique opportunity, again, that's a quote, to run China-style propaganda at home. No, that's not a conspiracy, it's on record. Check it out. So now let's enter the EU with its latest sledgehammer. CFSP 2025/966. I know it sounds boring, but it's not. It's a framework for freezing assets, silencing accounts, erasing the digital presence of anyone who undermines democracy. No judge, no trial, no defense. Just bureaucrats flipping a switch. You can now be financially disappeared just for supporting someone who shares the wrong link or for obstructing the democratic process, whatever that means this week. Even vague information manipulation qualifies. Basically, dissent has been rebranded as destabilization. And destabilization, that's ground for digital deletion. This is where lawfare meets bankfare. It's repression by spreadsheet. And it's being pitched, of course, as defending democracy. But let's be honest, what they are really defending is their narrative, their story, or their doctrine. And these two systems, NATO's brain war doctrine and Europe's financial kill switch laws, are two sides of the same coin. One breaks your will, the other breaks your wallet. It's a double-barreled assault on dissent. Psychological control paired with economic punishment. Think differently, lose access. Speak out, lose everything. We've already seen how this plays out. Journalists, software developers, I will come back to software developers in a moment, NGOs, even protest organizations, people whose only crime was challenging the status quo, have been debanked, shadow banned, and financially blacklisted. Sometimes quietly, sometimes publicly, as a warning. And what's really terrifying is how fast this is becoming normalized. It's all automated now. Algorithms flagging threats, AI spotting undesirable behavior, programmable money that can vanish or be frozen within a few keystrokes. No court, no warning, not a single human in the loop. And best of all, you can't fight it because there's no court involved. And here's the dark irony. The same liberal democracies that lecture the world about authoritarianism are now deploying the very tactics they claim to oppose. Surveillance, propaganda, political suppression. Just cleaner fonts and better user experience. In the next section, I will discuss how banks have become the new enforcers, how activists and independent platforms are being throttled or erased, and why this isn't just a policy drift. It's systematic coercion, technocratic repression wearing a democratic shirt. Because, and let's not make any mistakes here, this isn't about safety. It's about obedience and about control. And once your thoughts and your finances are both programmable, what part of your life isn't? Alright, let's try to make this a bit more concrete. You wake up, try to pay for coffee, and nothing. Cards declined. PayPal frozen. You go to the ATM, declined. Your bank account locked. Well, that's probably not going to be a good morning. No, it's not some kind of dystopian script. It's already happening. Call it financial censorship. Or if you prefer military terms, counterinsurgency by spreadsheet. The strategy is simple. Cut the funding, starve dissent. No trial, no charges, just economic disappearance. Now, sure, there are legitimate reasons to freeze assets. Terrorism, organized crime, the usual suspects. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I really want to emphasize this. What we are seeing is something else entirely. Governments and financial institutions blacklisting people based on thoughts, on speech, on digital expressions. Again, no charge, no jury, just a vague label like extremist or misinformation spreader, and boom, your access is gone. I already mentioned Canada. In 2022, during the Freedom Convoy protests, whether you like them or not is beside the point, the Trudeau government invoked emergency powers and froze hundreds of accounts. Even people who merely donated were targeted without court orders. The deputy PM bragged about how banks could shut people down with a phone call. A federal judge later ruled there was no emergency, but the damage was already done. A line had been crossed and it stayed crossed. And no, it's not just Canada. Now I come back to the software company and software engineers. In Iceland, a privacy-focused tech group called Talk Liberation had its funds frozen by Islandi Banki. Out of nowhere. The reason? Anti-terror laws, believe it or not. Which is laughable because they've passed every due diligence check. Turns out the founder, Susie Dawson, was a whistleblower who'd pissed off the wrong people. The bank eventually unfroze the money 9 months later. No apology, no accountability, just silence. That's the same playbook they used against WikiLeaks. Weaponize banking against journalism that hits too close to home. It's a pattern. In the UK, Nigel Farage, like him or not, was debanked by courts. Not for fraud, not for insolvency, but for his politics. They actually wrote it down. His views didn't align with their values. That's chilling. And when the scandal broke, turns out dozens of people across the spectrum had their accounts shut down. No explanation, just ESG, concerns or reputational risk. And if you think it's only the right who's getting clipped, think again. In the US, PayPal and Venmo have been quietly purging left-wing media. Consortium News, or Mintpress, gone. Funds frozen mid-fundraiser. No violations cited. Just that classic inconsistent with our agreement boilerplate, which basically means we don't like what you're saying. Consortium's editors figured it out. Their reporting on Ukraine didn't follow NATO's script. That's it. That's the crime. And Mintpress, their journalists got banned too. One of them tweeted, rightly, that if this happens in China, Western media would lose its mind. But when it happens here, silence. Or worse, cheers. And here's where it's getting darker. Because the banks aren't acting alone. In the US, after January 6th, Bank of America gave the FBI a list of customers who were in the sea that day. No warrant, just here you go. And that wasn't a one-off either. Congressional reports showed that the FBI fed banks lists of suspicious keywords. Trump, MAGA, even religious texts. Buy a Bible and book a flight, you might be triggering a suspicious activity report. Australia is pushing digital ID systems that tie your finances to your online identity. Combine that with speech monitoring, and what do you get? A Western-style social credit system. In Canada, officials talked about freezing accounts of people merely supporting protests online. In the UK, politicians have floated cutting off banking for hate speech or disinformation categories they define as they go. So where does this end? When financial services, which are the basic rails of modern life, become tools of ideological enforcement, democracy doesn't need a dictator. It just needs a terms of service and a trigger-happy algorithm. We have entered an era where your ability to participate in the economy might depend on how safe your opinions sound to a machine. We used to worry about surveillance. Now it's economic exile. Quiet, stainless, bureaucratic, and devastating. The system doesn't need to arrest you anymore. It just needs to erase you from the marketplace. Alright, so what I try to explain is that it seems the EU has built itself a legal nuke, and it's aimed squarely at its own citizens. That nuke that I'm referring to, of course, Council Decision 2025-966, sounds boring. Yeah, but don't be fooled. Some are already calling it Europe's new Inquisition, and not without reason. Because just like the original one, the Inquisition, this newer version hands out punishment without trial. The heresy, political dissent. The torture rack, bank freezes. Let's zoom out for a second. Traditionally, EU sanctions went after bad actors out there. Think warlords, oligarchs, rogue regimes. Sanctions were foreign policy tools. But on May 20, 2025, this year, the EU flipped the script. For the first time ever, it sanctions its own citizens. Why? Just because they said things Brussels didn't like. And the first victims? They've already been deleted. I'm talking about the German journalists Alina Lipp and Thomas Röper. They didn't hack anything. They didn't fund terrorism. They didn't even organize protests. They just reported, commented, shared views that challenged the EU's Ukraine narrative. And for that, their assets have been frozen, their travel restricted, their professional lives torched. Believe it or not, they cannot even enter their own home state. Now, Röper's case is especially telling. He runs a blog called Anti-Spiegel, in reference to the German magazine, Der Spiegel. He's critical of NATO and the war. He observed referenda in Russian-occupied Ukraine. He spoke at the UN area meeting, but from the Russian side. And suddenly, that makes him a propagandist, facilitating armed conflict. So again, this isn't about security, it's about narrative control. Röper didn't pick up a weapon, he picked up a microphone. And apparently, in today's Europe, that's enough to get you blacklisted. So how does this work legally? Council Decision 2024/2643, that's the framework 2025/966, apologies, expands on. It lets the EU sanctions anyone who undermines democracy, stability or security within the Union or abroad. That sounds reasonable, until you read the fine print. Because here's where it's getting slippery. Undermining public order, engaging in information manipulation, supporting destabilizations. These aren't criminal charges. They're kind of vibes, soft, mushy terms that let Brussels play judge, jury, and executioner. And it gets even worse. You don't even have to do anything. Just by being associated with someone on the list can land you there too. Guilt by retweet, guilt by association. No court, no trial, no warning. Just one day, bam! You are a threat to Europe's security. Good luck opening a bank account after that. The process is a black box. Diplomatic back channels, dossiers compiled by who knows whom, intelligence from member states, maybe even non-EU partners. If German or Ukrainian agencies decide you have a problem, you are a problem. And get this, the system even relies on private blacklists too. Ever heard of WorldCheck? It's a risk database used by banks across Europe. If it flags you as security risk, maybe because of a Wikipedia edit or an article someone didn't like, your bank may cut you off automatically. It's happened before. They flagged religious groups, journalists, NGOs, wrongly, but the damage was done. Reputations torched, accounts frozen, no appeal process, just algorithmic exile. So when a European journalist gets tagged as a Russian influencer, that label can spread like wildfire through governments, databases, private vendors, and risk-averse banks. And suddenly they're persona non grata across 27 countries. So clearly this isn't neutral. It's not balanced. It's not just about foreign threats. It's political. Patrick Barb, a recent guest on my show, can testify to that. Links in the description. But what about pro-NATO pundits who get things wrong? They, of course, they keep their jobs, their funding, their accounts. Pro-war think tanks that sell bogus narratives. No sanctions there. But if you question a dominant line, if you challenge Brussels or Washington too effectively, you are the threat. So we are entering the age of a weaponized financial ecosystem. An ecosystem that punishes the wrong speech but protects the right kind of lies. And that should really scare the hell out of anyone who still thinks democracy means anything. Because today it's lip and ripper. Tomorrow could be anyone who steps out of line. So we are watching the global blueprint for financial control rollout. And the West wrote the playbook. Governments that once warned about China's social credit system, they're now copying it, just with better branding. Instead of red stamps and state orders, we get risk scores, silent bans, and terms of service violations. Same outcome, different packaging. Let's take the US. It started subtle, right? Just a few banks or payment platforms like PayPal dropping problematic users. But behind the scenes, it's coordinated. The Treasury, intel agencies, the FBI, they're all in. If you sell firearms, and I'm not defending it, but if you do, if you talk crypto, if you run religious non-profits, again, if you create software or post the wrong meme, you might lose your account. Operation Choke Point showed us exactly how this works. Regulators nudged banks to treat entire legal industries as radioactive. No warrant, no hearing, just blacklisted. After January 6, it went next level. Banks handed over lists of customers who used the word MAGA or bought ammo. Yes, seriously. The feds were advising banks to use Patriot Act provisions, I mean imagine that, to preemptively dig through their customer space for what? Emotions. No crime required, just suspicions. You don't have to be in China to build a pre-crime model. You just need a loophole and a spreadsheet. And America's co-joined twin? The UK pretended to fix the problem after the Coutts Farage scandal blew up. I had already mentioned it. Farage got debanked for not aligning with the bank's values, whatever they are. But the real story was how common this practice had become. Banks were combing through Twitter, judging clients on ideology. But at the same time, the UK's Prevent program, that's the anti-extremist arm, has been encouraging banks to flag transactions linked to radical views. In 2025, of course, we saw that logic hit grassroots Palestine activists. The UK banned Palestine Action as an extremist group. Weeks later, banks froze the accounts of peaceful solidarity groups that had only supported Palestine actions in the past. Bike rides, candlelight vigils, sending food to Gaza. That's what they were doing. One treasurer was spot on. He said, "We have done nothing illegal, never even been questioned by police. And now we can't access our funds. Another one said rightly, they'll fund weapons manufacturers, but oh dear, if you send food to Gaza. In Israel, of course, it's much more direct. Authorities freeze Palestinian NGOs account routinely. No charges needed, just a label of terrorist. In 2021, they slapped that label on 6 civil society groups. No evidence, international outrage, but it worked. Banks cut them off, donors fled, and the operations collapsed. GoFundMe froze millions in Gaza donations in 2023, citing vague rules. So the line between policy compliance and political pressure, it's gone. And here's where it's getting global. If a government, especially one like Israel or the US, declares a group problematic, Western banks and platforms don't wait. They comply. You're off the financial grid, no matter where you live. On the other spectrum, of course, really authoritarian states don't even bother with these nuances. Russia designated Navalny's organization as extremist. That's it. Game over. Accounts frozen. Supporters under surveillance. In China, speak out on your trust score. Thanks. Suddenly you can't get a loan, a plane ticket, or even a job. It's clean, brutal control. And we act shocked. But if you're looking closely, the West is doing exactly the same thing, just with a couple of extra steps. It's not a government list. It's World Checker or other organizations like it. It's reputational risk modeling. If your name ends up on one of those back-end databases, maybe because you tweeted support for Palestine or criticized NATO, a bank might cut you off. No explanation, no recourse. And if you think it's just bad luck, think again. The systems are designed to be opaque. Denial by design. No appeal because no one admits it happening. So yeah, we like to wag our fingers at authoritarian states. But when it comes to financial control, the tactics have merged. The West just wears a nicer suit. The real question, of course, isn't whether this is happening. It is. The question is, how long until you land on the wrong side of the algorithm? Because by then it won't matter what your intentions were. It will be too late to explain. And the uncomfortable part, this stuff is going global fast. The playbook, this mix of financial surveillance, debanking, narrative control, is spreading across borders like wildfire. Western governments are swapping nodes under the banner of fighting hybrid threats and influence operations. Translations, more excuses to blur the line between security and civil liberties. And no, it's not just governments. You've got international bodies like AFTF, the Financial Action Task Force. It was originally built to fight money laundering and terror finance. That's legitimate stuff. But now they're throwing in terms like emerging threats and misinformation. That's code for expanding surveillance under the AML umbrella. Suddenly activists get lumped with actual criminals. And the banks, they're pressured to play ball. NATO is, of course, doing its part too. Through partnerships, it's exporting cognitive warfare strategies to allied militaries. Remember, Canada already ran a domestic spy ops on its own people during COVID. European members are doing similar things in the name of fighting Russian influence. So yeah, welcome to the era of friendly fire propaganda. And here's a dark piece of comedy. Authoritarian regimes are watching all of this and they're saying, look, the West does it too, which gives their repression some nicer, shiny cover. Meanwhile, Western officials throw up their hands and say, well, even democracies have to get tough sometimes. It's a feedback loop, a race to the bottom. And what's losing? Your financial freedom. But, and this matters, the backlash is growing. Leaks are already happening. Whistleblowers inside banks and government agencies are starting to come forward. One UK bank leak from 2024, it revealed a list of so-called politically exposed persons, not flagged for corruption, but for controversial opinion. You heard that right. A vaccine skeptic, a climate activist, labeled high risk for speech. Legal pushback is starting too. Talk Liberation, for example, I mentioned it before, has sued the Icelandic bank over the freeze. And they've got some serious legal firepower. The same lawyers who beat Visa and MasterCard in the WikiLeaks case. This case is a game changer. A precedent that makes banks think twice before killing accounts for political reasons. Then there's Farage. Say what you will about him, his debanking saga forced the CEO of NatWest to resign and triggered an independent review that called courts out for discrimination. Now the UK requires banks to actually justify closures. Imagine that. In the US, groups like ACLU and EFF are turning up the heat. They're going after PayPal and other platforms for acting like political referees, pulling the plug on people because of what they say, not because of what they do. EFF nailed it. A handful of payment giants control the whole online economy. And when they shut off your financial tap, that's not policy enforcement, that's silencing. Even in the EU, a few brave MEPs have started asking real questions. Are sanctions on journalists legal under the EU Charter? Doesn't that violate free speech and press rights? They're not winning yet, but they're loud enough to rattle the gate. Still, let's not kid ourselves, the trend is clear, and it's ugly. We are drifting towards a future where financial censorship is just normal. A baked-in tool of modern governance. Today it's terrorism, tomorrow it's hate speech, then it's misinformation, and the day after that, maybe just being unpopular. So we are watching a merger. National security, financial regulations, and platform policy into a kind of modern Grand Inquisitor. Not with ropes and crosses, but with dashboards, checklists, and silent blacklists. And the scariest part, most of it is happening in the dark, behind closed doors, under the radar. Unless, of course, we drag it into the light, it's gonna keep growing. And by the time it knocks on your door, it will be already too late to ask questions. So do your part and spread the news. So it looks to me we are barreling down a future where your bank balance comes with strings attached. Not legal ones, of course, ideological ones. The trend line is clear. If you don't toe the line, the financial system becomes your leash. One wrong move and it tightens. And as I try to explain here, this isn't some sci-fi dystopia. It's unfolding right now. A couple of words about CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies. Sounds innocuous, right? Streamlined payments, just digital money. But what they don't tell you, the same tech that makes it slick also makes it programmable. And no, not by you. As BIS own general manager said, BIS being the Bank for International Settlement, a CBDC gives the central bank absolute control over how your money is used. Absolute, that was his word. That means they can block, redirect, expire, or fine-tune every single transaction. Want to buy a product with a high carbon footprint? Want to travel? Want to support an independent journalist who says the wrong thing? Or you want to save your money instead of spending it? Too bad, not with CBDCs. During emergencies, they could freeze your funds instantly. Again, no trial, no appeal, just gone. And it gets even worse. Institutions like the IMF, they love this stuff. One of their executives said CBDCs can be precisely targeted to control what you can own and where you can spend it. Sounds like control, not currency to me. And AI, it's already here. It's scanning your transactions, linking them to your social posts, and calculating risk scores. If you want to know how far this already goes, especially if you own an iPhone, watch my clip, which is called "Your iPhone is Now a Snitch." Links in the description. And these systems, they are riddled with bias. Algorithms misread satire, for example. They mislabel journalists. Now imagine one freezing your funds based on a false positive. Meanwhile, the definition of dangerous speech is expanding fast. Anti-vax, disinfo, critic climate policies, extremism, Ukraine, question of war, destabilization. Suddenly dissent is rebranded as a security threat. And in that world, democracy means agreeing with power. Anything else? Financial exile. So, what can you do? Well, first let's talk about tech resistance. When WikiLeaks got cut off in 2010, I believe it was, Bitcoin kept them afloat. Decentralized coins like Monero, for example, go further. Harder to trace, harder to shut down. Imperfect, sure, but vital. That's also why states are scrambling to crush them. And what about media? Decentralized platforms like Pancake aim to keep speech alive without gatekeepers pulling the plug. It's about building systems where speech and transactions aren't dependent on corporate approval. Then legal firewalls. Just as we banned redlining, we need laws against political debanking. If you're engaged in lawful activity, your views shouldn't matter. Texas passed a law barring banks from blacklisting gun businesses. That's not surprising. But we need more like that, plus stronger financial privacy laws. The fact that Bank of America handed names to the FBI without a warrant, that should be an alarm bell. That should scare the hell out of us. Due process should be the floor, not the ceiling. If a bank freezes you, they owe you an explanation, a real one, and a way to fight back. Groups like EFF are on the front lines exposing shady moves by PayPal and co. And when enough people get angry, it works. Remember when PayPal tried to fine users $2,500 for misinformation? I mean, get this. PayPal wanted to fine its own users, but the backlash was so intense they walked it back. Same with the Free Speech Union in the UK. When PayPal dropped them, public pressure forced a reversal into 2 weeks. Shame still works. Use it. Even the extremely slow EU court cases have delisted people wrongly sanctioned. It gums up the machine, and that's a win. And personally, diversify. Use cash when you can. Don't keep everything in one mega bank. Some are going old school. Credit unions, local currencies, even bartering. It's about resilience. Because here's the thing. If free speech costs you your bank account, then it's not really free, is it? As Fire put it, access to payments is essential. You can't donate, publish, subscribe, or survive without it. I mean, that's self-explanatory. That gives a few private gatekeepers enormous power. And if they're taking cues from governments, then that's a private-public censorship cartel. And it should terrify you. In the past, if a state, any state, blocked your email because you criticized them, we called it totalitarian. Today, blocking your Visa card does exactly the same thing. It's 2025 and we are standing at a fork in the road. Down one path, we rationalize each new restriction. We say it's just for safety or that person crossed the line, until we all live on eggshells and silence becomes self-preservation. Down the other, we fight back. We say our money, our minds, our rights. We demand transparency. We build alternatives. We challenge the system. Not tomorrow, now. Because once financial censorship becomes the norm, democracy becomes performance and dissent becomes a luxury for the rich and well-connected. And that's not freedom. That's a velvet cage. We don't have to accept it, but we have to act. So, for the brave souls who stuck with me that long, if you're hearing this, then one thing is for sure. You are ahead of the pack and nobody can take that away from you. So keep doing what you're doing and remember, always look beyond the headlines. Over and out.